In an era where economic dynamics are increasingly complex, a confluence of factors such as inflation, tariffs, and demographic shifts are shaping the landscape of the United States and beyond. Recent discussions highlight the implications of these elements, showcasing various perspectives from economists and policymakers alike. The U.S. economy continues to grapple with inflation, prompting scrutiny of the Federal Reserve's monetary policies. A recent analysis from the Wall Street Journal underscores the intricate relationship between inflation rates, interest rates, and the overall economic environment. The Fed's efforts to stabilize the economy through adjusted interest rates have sparked debate among economists. Some argue that maintaining low rates for prolonged periods may exacerbate inflation, while others contend that aggressive rate hikes could stifle growth. As the Fed navigates this precarious balance, the impact of its decisions reverberates through various sectors. From consumer spending to investment strategies. Compounding these economic challenges are the effects of tariffs. A piece by economist Pierre Lemieux sheds light on the implications of President Trump's tariff policies, particularly concerning auto manufacturing. While Trump argues that such tariffs will bolster U.S. manufacturing, Lemieux counters that the burden ultimately falls on American consumers who face higher prices. The cost imposed on the foreign exporter lies in lower export sales, Lemieux explains, emphasizing that the true economic impact of tariffs extends beyond immediate trade figures. This nuanced perspective invites a deeper examination of the costs associated with relocation for foreign firms, which may find moving operations to the U.S. financially burdensome, especially in light of rising production costs and fluctuating protectionist policies. Meanwhile, a compelling study from the Center for Economic Policy Research explores the connection between housing and fertility rates, revealing unexpected insights into family planning. Researchers Bernardus van Doornik, Dimas Fazio, Tarun Ramadorai, and Janice Scrastens present evidence from Brazil that points to early access to homeownership as a significant factor influencing fertility decisions. Housing affects family planning through affordability, stability, and relocation to better environments, the authors argue, suggesting that policymakers should prioritize housing reforms such as subsidies and zoning changes to support young families and address declining fertility rates. This research illustrates the broader economic implications of housing accessibility, emphasizing that family planning is intricately intertwined with economic stability and growth. Amid these discussions, President Trump has expressed dissatisfaction with the Wall Street Journal's editorial stance, specifically criticizing its coverage of his trade policies. In a recent post on his Truth Social platform, he labeled some of the journal's editorials as real clinkers, particularly those questioning the efficacy of his auto tariffs. Despite his assertions that these tariffs will invigorate the U.S. auto industry, the economic realities suggest a more complicated picture, one that reflects the ongoing tension between political rhetoric and economic outcomes. As these multifaceted issues unfold, the interplay between inflation, tariffs, housing, and demographic trends continues to shape the discourse surrounding the U.S. economy. Policymakers are urged to consider holistic approaches that encompass not just immediate economic indicators but also long-term implications for families and businesses alike. Looking ahead, the challenge will be to foster an environment that encourages sustainable growth while addressing the diverse needs of a changing population. The path forward will require collaboration and innovative thinking as the stakes remain high for both the economy and the well-being of its citizens. In the world of college basketball, few rivalries ignite excitement like that of the Kentucky Wildcats and the Missouri Tigers. As the two teams prepare to clash in their regular season finale, the stakes are high not just for pride but also for positioning in the upcoming SEC tournament. With head coach Mark Pope of Kentucky acknowledging the similarities in offensive strategy between the Wildcats and the Tigers, fans can expect a thrilling showdown. Both teams enter the game with impressive records, Kentucky at 20-10 and Missouri at 21-9, each ranked in national polls, with Missouri holding the edge at 19th in the USA Today Coaches Poll and 15th in the Associated Press Top 25. The Wildcats, ranked 24th and 19th respectively, are eager to make a statement as they head into the postseason. Missouri has been a formidable opponent this season, showcasing a potent offense that ranks among the best in the nation. With an average of 27.2 free throws attempted and 19.8 made per game, the Tigers lead the SEC in both categories. Their bench depth has also been impressive, contributing an average of 36.73 points per game, and they boast a stellar field goal percentage of 48.9 coupled with a 37.3% success rate from beyond the arc. As Pope noted, they have incredibly capable shooters that are dangerous, highlighting the threat posed by their perimeter players. Defensively, Missouri is equally impressive, leading the conference with an average of 9.7 steals per game. This aggressive defensive strategy has allowed them to capitalize on opponents' mistakes, making their transition offense particularly deadly. "They push in transition really hard," Pope remarked, underscoring the need for Kentucky to remain vigilant throughout the game. As the teams prepare to tip off at noon Eastern Time at Mizzou Arena in Columbia, Missouri, fans are eager to tune in. The game will be broadcasted on ESPN, featuring play-by-play commentary from Tom Hart and analysis by Dane Bradshaw. For those who prefer radio coverage, the UK radio network will provide the call on 8:40 AM in Louisville and 6:30 AM and 98.1 FM in Lexington. In terms of betting odds, Kentucky is currently a 4.5-point underdog, with the over/under set at 169.5 points. The money line reflects Kentucky at plus 170 and Missouri at minus 205, indicating the competitive nature of this matchup. As both teams look to gain momentum heading into the SEC tournament, today's game promises to be a pivotal moment in the season. With the Wildcats aiming to assert their dominance in the conference and the Tigers looking to solidify their strong standing, fans can expect a high-energy encounter filled with intensity and skill. As the season winds down, the outcomes of such matchups will undoubtedly shape the landscape of the NCAA tournament in the weeks to come, with both programs eager to make a deeper in a significant shakeup of the federal workforce. The Trump administration has initiated a series of layoffs targeting several key agencies, with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) poised to lose approximately 20% of its staff. This move comes as part of a broader directive from President Donald Trump, who has reportedly empowered agency leaders to take charge of their department's staffing decisions rather than relying on the controversial Department of Government Efficiency (DOGE) led by Elon Musk. As reported by the New York Times, NOAA is expected to lay off about 1,000 workers, adding to the 1,300 employees already let go. This reduction raises concerns about the agency's capabilities in weather forecasting, particularly as the hurricane season approaches. The fear is that cutting such a significant portion of staff will hinder our ability to provide timely and accurate forecasts, commented a NOAA insider who remained anonymous due to the sensitivity of the situation. The Central Intelligence Agency (CIA) is also undergoing a restructuring, with reports indicating the termination of probationary employees and the dismissal of diversity staffers. These cuts are aligned with the administration's push to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within the federal government. A recent court ruling has granted CIA Director John Ratcliffe broad authority to enact these firings, further complicating the agency's workforce dynamics. Other departments are not spared from job cuts. The Department of Veterans Affairs aims to reduce its workforce to 2019 levels, necessitating the removal of around 80,000 positions. Similarly, the Internal Revenue Service (IRS) plans to cut its nearly 100,000-person workforce by 50%. A move that follows the termination of approximately 7,000 IRS employees in recent months. The layoffs come during tax season, raising alarm among experts about the agency's ability to process returns efficiently. The disruptions extend to the U.S. Agency for International Development (USAID), where thousands of employees were reportedly given mere minutes to vacate their offices as the agency faces a substantial downsizing. In the wake of these layoffs, federal agencies are grappling with the implications of losing experienced personnel, particularly in areas critical to national security and public service. The Trump administration's strategy appears to be driven by a desire to cut government spending by 30% to 40%, with layoffs serving as a major area of focus. We're seeing a widespread effort to root out what is perceived as government waste, said a political analyst, highlighting how Musk's Doge has been positioned as a key player in this initiative. However, some Republicans have begun to voice concerns over the impact of these cuts, calling for a more compassionate approach to workforce reductions. As the administration navigates legal challenges surrounding the mass layoffs, including lawsuits from labor unions and former government officials, the future of many employees remains uncertain. The implementation of Schedule F, an executive order that reclassifies federal civilian employees to at-will status, could further exacerbate the situation by stripping job protections from thousands of workers. While the immediate fallout from these layoffs is still unfolding, the long-term ramifications for federal agencies and the services they provide could be profound. As the administration pushes forward with its agenda, the question remains, how will these drastic staffing reductions affect the federal government's ability to operate effectively in the face of emerging challenges? Only time will tell, but the implications of these cuts are likely to be felt well beyond the current administration. In a gripping clash at the Fiserv Forum, the Milwaukee Bucks suffered a narrow 111-109 defeat against the Orlando Magic, ending their four-game winning streak. The loss left fans and analysts pondering the implications for a team with championship aspirations as they prepare to face the Eastern Conference leading Cleveland Cavaliers on Sunday. The game was marked by a fierce comeback attempt from the Bucks, who found themselves trailing by as many as 15 points with just over 8 minutes left. All-star point guard Damian Lillard had a chance to seal the game with a step-back three-pointer at the buzzer, but his shot fell short, igniting a wave of disappointment among the home crowd. Reflecting on the final play, Lillard acknowledged, "Once I got into that space, I made my mind up I was going to go for the win. I just lost my balance a little bit." Despite the heartbreak, the Bucks demonstrated resilience, with Giannis Antetokounmpo spearheading a late-game rally. Antetokounmpo finished with an impressive 37 points and 11 rebounds, underscoring his status as a dominant force on the court. His leadership was crucial in bringing the team back into contention. "It was a matter of time for us to kind of get some momentum, get some energy," Antetokounmpo noted, emphasizing the need for the team to harness that energy moving forward. The Magic, led by head coach Jamal Mosley, executed a game plan that emphasized defensive intensity and ball control, making it difficult for the Bucks to find their rhythm. Orlando's Paolo Banchero was a standout performer, contributing 29 points, while Cole Anthony supported with 22 points, further complicating the Bucks' efforts to mount a comeback. The Magic's ability to slow down the pace of the game and force Milwaukee into isolation plays proved effective as the Bucks struggled to share the ball, recording only 6 assists in the first half. Coach Doc Rivers expressed frustration with his team's offensive execution, stating, "We didn't move the ball a lot. We gave in to a lot of their physicality." The Bucks, known for their three-point shooting prowess, managed just 2 successful shots from beyond the arc in the first half, a stark contrast to their usual offensive identity. The absence of key bench players like Gary Trent Jr. and Bobby Portis Jr. was felt acutely as the Bucks' second unit struggled to make an impact. Rivers opted to shorten his bench, but even that move could not prevent the Magic from taking control early in the game. The Bucks' bench players, often a source of energy and scoring, failed to find their footing against a determined Magic defense. As the Bucks look to rebound from this setback, the focus will be on improving their offensive flow and addressing the vulnerabilities that were exposed against Orlando. The team's next challenge against the Cavaliers will provide an opportunity to gauge their readiness for the postseason as they seek to regain their winning form. With the playoffs on the horizon, the Bucks need to capitalize on lessons learned from this defeat. As Lillard aptly put it, "You gotta be able to live with either way that it goes, and you gotta be able to move on." The coming days will test not only their skills on the court but also their resilience as a team. With adjustments and renewed focus, Milwaukee aims to turn their season around and solidify their status as contenders in the Eastern Conference. As the landscape of international trade continues to shift dramatically, the repercussions of President Donald Trump's recent tariff announcements are sending shockwaves through businesses and global markets. With investors on edge and corporate leaders adjusting their strategies, the implications of these tariffs extend far beyond the United States, affecting trade relations with key partners such as Canada and Mexico. On March 4, 2025, Trump imposed a sweeping 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, a move that was met with immediate retaliatory actions. Just 2 days later, Canada announced its own 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, signaling a tit-for-tat escalation that experts warn could lead to a protracted trade war. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau characterized Trump's tariffs as very dumb, emphasizing that such actions could strain the long-standing cooperative relationship between the neighboring countries. The economic ramifications of these tariffs were promptly reflected in the stock market. Companies from various sectors expressed concern over potential price hikes and shifts in consumer behavior. Best Buy CEO Cory Berry noted on a recent earnings call that if the tariffs remained in place, consumers could expect significant price increases on goods sourced from Mexico and Canada. Similarly, Target's leadership indicated that they would need to adjust prices on fruits and vegetables if the tariffs persisted, highlighting the tariffs' potential impact on everyday consumers. In an environment already fraught with uncertainty, corporate earnings calls have become a platform for executives to voice their apprehensions over the economic consequences of these tariffs. For instance, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise saw its stock plummet 17% after warning that tariffs would erode profits in its server business. CFO Marie Myers remarked, "Recent tariff announcements have created uncertainty for our industry, indicating that companies are scrambling to devise strategies to mitigate tariff impacts on their operations." The uncertainty surrounding trade policies has not only affected U.S. companies. International firms like Japan's Nintendo saw their stock values decline as investors reacted to the potential fallout from the tariffs. Nintendo's shares dropped over 9%, reflecting a broader concern that the tariffs could disrupt global supply chains and consumer markets. Goldman Sachs recently revised its economic forecast, predicting that the increased effective tariff rate would dampen U.S. economic growth. The firm lowered its Q4 GDP growth forecast from 2.2% to 1.7% and raised the probability of a recession from 15% to 20%. The analysts at Goldman Sachs emphasized that prolonged tariff policies could lead to inflationary pressures influencing the Federal Reserve's monetary policy decisions in the months ahead. As companies navigate this turbulent environment, some are exploring new sourcing strategies to lessen their reliance on imports subject to tariffs. For example, Target is shifting some of its sourcing to countries in the Western Hemisphere, while Kroger is diversifying its suppliers to minimize potential tariff impacts. Meanwhile, firms such as Apple and Eli Lilly are committing significant investments to bolster their U.S. manufacturing capabilities, suggesting a strategic pivot in the face of escalating trade tensions. The unfolding trade war between the U.S. and its neighboring countries highlights the fragile nature of international trade agreements and the potential for significant economic fallout. As President Trump continues to assert his stance on tariffs, the global business community remains vigilant, assessing the long-term implications for their operations and the wider economy. With further negotiations expected and the possibility of additional tariffs looming, the coming months will be crucial in determining the trajectory of U.S. trade policy and its impact on global markets. The question now is whether a resolution can be reached before the situation escalates further, affecting not only corporate profits but also consumer prices and economic stability. In a groundbreaking study presented at the American Heart Association's Epidemiology and Prevention, Lifestyle and Cardiometabolic Health Scientific Sessions 2025, researchers have unveiled compelling evidence suggesting that increased physical activity may significantly lower the risk of cardiovascular death among postmenopausal women with a history of cancer. The research, which is still considered preliminary, underscores the importance of physical activity in enhancing longevity and reducing health risks for cancer survivors. Conducted by a team from the University of California, San Diego, the study included nearly 2,500 women aged between 63 and 99 who had been diagnosed with various cancers at least 1 year prior to the study. Over an average follow-up period of 8 years, the participants wore accelerometers that tracked their daily physical activity, allowing researchers to analyze the relationship between movement and mortality rates. The findings revealed that engaging in just 1 hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity daily was associated with a striking 40% reduction in the risk of death from any cause and an impressive 60% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. Eric Hyde, Ph.D. MPH, the lead author of the study, emphasized the significance of these results, stating, "Encouraging cancer survivors to be more active, sit less, and take more steps every day could be a feasible approach for prolonging survivorship and reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease mortality." The data also highlighted that for every additional 2,500 steps taken per day, there was a corresponding 34% decrease in the risk of cardiovascular death. Notably, the greatest benefits were observed among participants who achieved daily step counts of 5,000 to 6,000. The American Heart Association has long advocated for physical activity as a cornerstone of cardiovascular health, recommending adults engage in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise weekly. The findings from this study align with these guidelines and further emphasize the critical role of exercise in cancer recovery. As Keith Diaz, Ph.D., a behavioral medicine professor at Columbia University, pointed out, while structured exercise remains the most efficient and effective way to improve your health, these findings highlight that walking, at any intensity, matters. He further noted that the accessibility of walking as a form of exercise makes it an ideal starting point for many individuals, especially those navigating life after cancer. However, the study also addressed a concerning trend: the impact of sedentary behavior on health outcomes. It was found that every 102 minutes of sitting per day was linked to a 12% increase in all-cause mortality and a staggering 30% increase in cardiovascular death risk. This underscores the need for proactive measures to combat prolonged sitting, particularly in populations with a history of cancer who may already be facing additional health challenges. Although the results are promising, researchers caution that further studies are necessary to validate these findings. Limitations included the single measure of physical activity taken after cancer diagnosis and the lack of data regarding cancer stage at diagnosis. Future research should aim to assess physical activity at multiple time points to better understand its relation to cancer survival and overall health. As the AHA's scientific sessions conclude, the spotlight remains on the critical interplay between physical activity and health outcomes for cancer survivors. The implications of this research are profound, suggesting that simple lifestyle modifications can lead to significant health benefits. As the field of cardio-oncology continues to evolve, the focus on integrating physical activity into recovery plans for cancer survivors could become a vital component of improving long-term health and wellness. In conclusion, as researchers and healthcare providers work to refine strategies for supporting cancer survivors, the evidence for physical activity as a powerful tool in reducing cardiovascular risks cannot be ignored. The future may hold new guidelines and interventions aimed at promoting an active lifestyle, ultimately fostering healthier, longer lives for those affected by cancer. In a groundbreaking study published in the Journal of Perinatology, researchers have explored whether providing ventilatory assistance prior to umbilical cord clamping can mitigate the risks of early death and intraventricular hemorrhage (IVH) in extremely preterm infants. Conducted by a team from various medical institutions across the United States and Canada, this multi-center randomized clinical trial sheds light on a critical aspect of neonatal care that could influence outcomes for the most vulnerable infants. The study, led by Kaquanta Barlow and colleagues, was inspired by previous research indicating improved hemodynamic stability in preterm lambs that received ventilatory support during delayed umbilical cord clamping (DCC). The researchers hypothesized that similar practices could benefit human infants, potentially reducing the incidence of IVH and early mortality, a significant concern for infants born between 23 and 28 weeks of gestation. The trial enrolled 570 infants, with randomization occurring just prior to delivery. Infants in the intervention group received tactile stimulation and airway suctioning during the initial moments of DCC with ventilatory support commencing 30 seconds after birth. In contrast, the control group underwent standard practice with cord clamping occurring 30 to 60 seconds post-birth depending on respiratory status. The aim was to evaluate the primary outcomes of death before day 7 or the presence of IVH on ultrasound within a week after birth. Despite the carefully structured methodology, the results revealed no significant difference between the intervention and control groups concerning the primary outcome, with incidences of IVH or early death at 34.9% and 32.5%, respectively. This aligns with what the authors describe as a critical finding. The lack of impact on IVH and early mortality suggests that the timing and approach to respiratory support may require further investigation. Secondary outcomes presented mixed results. The intervention group exhibited higher median hematocrit levels and better 1-minute APGAR scores, suggesting some benefits from the intervention. Notably, infants requiring endotracheal intubation were less frequent in the intervention group, though the authors cautioned that this might reflect an imbalance in the number of infants categorized as not breathing well at 30 seconds. This study raises important questions about the physiological implications of ventilatory assistance during cord clamping. While previous animal studies demonstrated benefits under specific conditions, the transition to human subjects has proven more complex. The authors speculate that the absence of significant differences in primary outcomes could stem from factors such as the timing of respiratory support initiation and the assessment of lung aeration, which were not rigorously evaluated in this trial. As the researchers conclude, while the VENT-FIRST trial establishes the safety and feasibility of intact cord respiratory support, the findings underscore the need for further studies to refine these practices. The community of neonatal care providers must consider ongoing research into ventilatory support during DCC to optimize outcomes for preterm infants. Looking ahead, the medical community is poised for a deeper exploration of this topic, with several ongoing studies evaluating the implications of ventilatory support in different contexts. The hope is that future findings will contribute to evidence-based guidelines that can improve the survival rates and health outcomes of extremely preterm infants, ultimately enhancing the quality of neonatal care. In the world of international trade, the stakes are high and strategies are constantly evolving. As the United States embarks on another round of trade tensions under President Donald Trump, China is demonstrating a calculated shift in its approach to tariffs and negotiations. Unlike the tumultuous first term of Trump, where Beijing found itself scrambling to respond to unexpected trade measures, the Chinese leadership appears more prepared and strategically sound in its responses to the renewed economic hostilities. Recent developments have seen the U.S. impose a series of tariffs, escalating from a 10% tariff introduced on February 4 to an additional 10% recently announced. In response, China has signaled its readiness to retaliate, not merely as an act of defiance but as a strategic maneuver to assert its position on the global stage. The Chinese government has already implemented countermeasures, such as imposing taxes on key U.S. agricultural imports and suspending lumber imports, actions that underscore its commitment to protecting its economic interests. Sun Yun, director of the China program at the Stimson Center, noted that as Washington escalates the tariff, Beijing doesn't see other options but to retaliate. This sentiment encapsulates the current mindset in Beijing. While open to negotiations, China is unwilling to appear weak or desperate for talks. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has articulated a clear message stating, "If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end," reflecting a resolve to stand firm against U.S. pressures. The contrast between the current situation and the trade war's first phase is striking. In 2018, China responded to tariffs with a series of hastily arranged counteractions, often seen as reactive. However, this time the Chinese are utilizing a more sophisticated toolkit, which includes tariffs, export controls, and regulatory reviews designed to inflict economic pain on the U.S. businesses. Analysts suggest that this level of preparedness stems from lessons learned during the previous years of conflict where appeasing Trump proved ineffective. Daniel Russell, Vice President for International Security and Diplomacy at the Asia Society Policy Institute, emphasized that the continuity of Xi Jinping's leadership has enabled a more coherent strategy. That's not a scheduling issue, it's leverage for China, Russell explained, highlighting that she is unlikely to engage in talks unless he perceives a level playing field. This calculated restraint may leave room for negotiation but also demonstrates a strong stance against perceived American aggression. Scott Kennedy, a prominent scholar on Chinese economics, pointed out that China is now better equipped to handle the shocks of trade disruptions thanks in part to diversifying its trade partnerships. The country has significantly reduced its reliance on U.S. goods, sourcing agricultural products from countries like Brazil and Argentina instead. This shift has contributed to a more resilient Chinese economy, which, while experiencing a slowdown, continues to grow at an annual pace of nearly 5%. As the U.S. grapples with the implications of its tariffs, especially considering that over 80% of Mexico's exports and 75% of Canada's exports go to the U.S., the situation remains fluid and complex. China's approach may serve as a blueprint for how countries can navigate the treacherous waters of international trade amidst rising tensions. Looking ahead, the trajectory of U.S.-China relations will depend heavily on the willingness of both nations to engage in meaningful dialogue. With pressures mounting on both sides, the potential for escalation remains high, but so does the possibility for a strategic recalibration that could lead to more stable economic interactions. As the world watches closely, the coming months will reveal whether diplomacy can trump conflict in this high-stakes geopolitical chess game. In a world increasingly driven by scientific advancement and technological innovation, the intersection of science and activism has never been more pronounced. This was vividly illustrated at the Stand Up for Science rally held at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., where thousands of scientists, students, and advocates gathered to voice their concerns over the Trump administration's severe cuts to federal science funding and workforce. The event, held on March 8, 2025, showcased not only a palpable sense of urgency but also a call for unity among those dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. Dr. Francis Collins, the former director of the National Institutes of Health (NIH) and a prominent figure in biomedical research, captured this sentiment as he took to the steps of the memorial to share a song, a symbol of hope amidst uncertainty. "We have to sing about this," he urged, reminding the crowd that taxpayer-funded science is indeed of the people, by the people, for the people, as he invoked the spirit of Lincoln. The rally, which peaked at around 5,000 attendees, was a testament to the growing anxiety within the scientific community, a mood that has shifted since the larger demonstrations seen in the March for Science in 2017. The atmosphere at the rally was one of both determination and concern. Colette Delawala, a graduate student and one of the event's organizers, expressed her evolution from a non-activist to a passionate advocate. "I never thought of myself as an activist, that's never been part of my identity," she confessed. Yet the urgency of the situation compelled her and others like her to take action. This rally wasn't merely about protest, it was a collective stand for the future of scientific research that directly impacts lives, with attendees raising placards emblazoned with slogans ranging from "Fund Science, Defund Doge" to "Girls Just Wanna Have Funding for Science." Among the speakers were diverse voices from the scientific community, including Bill Nye, the famed science communicator, and Representative Bill Foster, the only PhD physicist in Congress. They emphasized the critical need for robust public funding to support vital research initiatives that lead to medical breakthroughs, climate change solutions, and advancements in technology. "It's not just science that's under attack, it's facts," Foster pointed out, highlighting the broader implications of the current political climate on public understanding of science. While the rally in Washington was a significant event, it was part of a larger movement, with simultaneous protests occurring across the nation and even globally. From Chicago to Berkeley, scientists voiced their frustrations and hopes, further emphasizing the notion that these issues transcend politics and are fundamentally about protecting the integrity of scientific inquiry. However, the mood was not without its shadows, attendees spoke of fear and apprehension regarding retribution from governmental bodies, a sentiment echoed by many who chose to remain anonymous at the protest. As the rally concluded, the conversation around the future of science funding and public policy continued. While the event did not draw the massive crowds of past protests, the organizers left feeling accomplished. Delawala noted that one protest alone is not sufficient. "We've learned that one protest isn't enough," she reflected, hinting at ongoing efforts to engage legislators and advocate for necessary changes in funding. In a related development, the scientific community is grappling with revelations that could alter our understanding of climate change timelines. A recent study from the University of Western Australia suggests that we may have already surpassed the critical threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, a target set by the Paris Climate Accords. Researchers found that by examining long-lived Caribbean sclerosponges, which serve as natural archives of ocean temperatures, the world potentially exceeded this threshold as early as 2020. While the study's findings are met with skepticism by some in the scientific community, the urgency of climate action remains undisputed, with experts warning that immediate steps must be taken to mitigate further warming. Meanwhile, NASA's Voyager spacecraft continue their solitary journey through interstellar space, with mission engineers recently shutting down certain instruments to extend their operational life. Launched in 1977, the Voyagers have traveled billions of miles, providing invaluable data about our solar system and beyond. As power supplies dwindle, the decision to deactivate instruments is a bittersweet reminder of the passage of time and the fragility of our exploration efforts. As the dust settles from the Stand Up for Science rally and the implications of new scientific findings unfold, one thing remains clear: the commitment to science as a cornerstone of society is more crucial than ever. The intersections of activism, research, and public policy will undoubtedly shape the future of not just science, but the very fabric of our understanding of the world. The road ahead is fraught with challenges, but the rallying cry of scientists and advocates alike signals a collective determination to defend and promote the pursuit of knowledge for the betterment of humanity.